Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have a big group, so we're going to give everyone a minute or two to log on and we'll get started shortly. Good morning, everyone. We're going to give people a few minutes to log on and we'll get started shortly. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Unlocking the Power of KPIs and Metrics in Employer Relations. We're recording today's session and we'll share it with you following the webinar. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function on your Zoom panel. Now, I'd like to hand it over to our moderator for today's session, HR Acuity CEO, Deb Muller.
Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to our first webinar of 2025. It's so great to see you. I'm a little distracted because I'm looking at the list and very jealous. We have someone that's in Portugal. We have someone in Buenos Aires, and they're warm. I think everybody else probably has an extra sweater on or something today. I'm actually in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I hate to tell you that I'm cold, but it's a little colder than I would like to be right now as well. Really excited about today's webinar. I think we still have folks joining in. Let us know where you're calling from. But so excited about this because we're going to be talking about something that's near and dear to my heart, and I know really on top of mind for all of our ER professionals out there. We're talking about KPIs and metrics in employee relations. It's a topic that always comes up, and we are really going up the maturity curve on how we look at these things. I think today is really another opportunity for us to do that. Employee relations is a strategic function, and just like all of our other strategic functions, finance, marketing, we should have our own set of KPIs that we are looking at consistently. Whether you are at company A or company B, this is what we look at to understand how we're doing as far as building trust with our employees, creating a safer workplace, and also mitigating risk for our organization. What is the ROI that we're delivering, and how can we have really strategic conversations with our business partners about what's going on in their business unit, and what is the data that actually shows that. So really, really excited to go talk about that today. Before we get started, I just want to share a little bit about HR Acuity. If you're not familiar with us, if this is your first webinar with us, welcome. We are the leaders in employee relations and investigations case management, all the way from intake through aftercare. We help your organizations understand what's going on, make employees feel trusted when things go wrong at work, because yes, they will go wrong at work, and then ensure that you have the appropriate documentation and processes and data to understand that and get what we're talking about today, more predictive and more analytical in your understanding of what's going on. We're not here to talk about our technology, but if you're interested in learning more, please let us know. We'd be happy to take you on a curiosity tour. All I have to say is, who knows what 2025 is going to bring for us. It's going to be an interesting year. However, documentation will be more critical than ever. So we are happy to partner with you and help you to make sure that you have the right processes and technology for your organization. Okay. Also, if you're new or if you're not new, you are now part of our community. You're here, you're in. Sorry, we're not going to let you out. But we do a lot of things to foster the employee relations community and the function, and we want you to participate. Every year we do a benchmark study. We're going to talk about that today because the benchmark study is going to be critical in those KPIs to give you an external sort of placeholder to see how you compare. It's actually open right now. We are collecting data from 2024. We do it every January. So if you are an organization, if you're in an organization with 1,000 or more employees, please participate. This is last year's survey. I like a good hard copy, but you can download this on our website. You can download all 8 years that we've done to get information, but we really need participation. Last year, our study covered over 8.5 million employees. We're gearing up for 10 million this year. So please participate, take the time. It contributes to the community, it contributes to what we're doing as a function together. And Lexi will make sure, I think she just did all the resources there if you want to participate. You can take the ERQ, which is the maturity model for employee relations, to show where you are on your journey as an organization. That's on our website. Our roundtable event is for ER leaders. We have over 400 ER leaders part of our roundtable group. We're getting really close to announcing the dates for 2025, but let's just say it's in the fall. It's in a great city, and we're really looking forward to it. So stay tuned to learn more about that. And hopefully you're all part of Empower, which is our employee relations community for everybody in employee relations or who does employee relations. It's free. If you haven't joined, the link is there. Great collaboration going on there as well. All right, next slide. For those of you who've done webinars with us, you know we love to give back. And of course, it was not a hard decision that because you are participating to this webinar and as a thank you to our experts that are in our panel, we will be making a contribution to the California Fire Foundation. And our hearts go out to all of our colleagues and friends and peers, and if you have family that are in the LA area, and we hope that those are under control soon and that you can start rebuilding. So we hope to help just a little bit and thank the firefighters that are really doing such great work out there. All right, upcoming events. We sometimes do this at the end and then people have to leave, and we want to make sure you know what's coming next. Okay, January 29th, next week. If you've never heard Lori Dean before, you need to join this webinar. She is a staple at our employee roundtable. She's great. She's actually a plaintiff's attorney, but you're going to like her. And she's going to talk about AI in the investigation process. That's on January 29th at 2 p.m. She gave a preview of that at our roundtable in October last year. It was great, really well received. So mark your calendar. We also do syncs in Empower, ER syncs, where we bring together practitioners to talk about what's going on, certain topics. So on January 30th, if you're in healthcare, you want to join that. So we're going to have ER leaders in healthcare talking about how do you optimize ER within your industry. So mark your calendar for that as well. Oh, yes, I just saw that in the chat. The Empower community, by the way, there's now an app. Go to the App Store. You can download an app so you can keep your Empower friends and conversations going even when you're on the go. So don't forget to do that. All right, so let's get going with our webinar today. I want to invite our panelists to turn their videos on, and I can introduce them when we get the conversation going. We're going to be doing a little bit of back and forth between slides up and slides not. So if you're not familiar with it, when you see the panelists, you can actually, if you put the panelists on your right, you can slide. There's a little slide bar. You can't see that I'm doing it to make the faces a little bit bigger so you can have half slide, half people. But I want to welcome our wonderful panel and thank them. We have Adam Pinnell, who's the Director of Employee Relations and Investigations at Honeywell, Margarita Ramos, who's the Global Head of Employee Relations. She was at Splunk. Her organization was acquired, and she's now in transition, but she's great. So anybody out there with a role. And Michelle Sones, who's the Head of Global Employee Relations at Robinhood. And last but certainly not least, Rebecca Trotsky, who's the Chief People Officer here at HR Acuity. So great powerhouse of a panel, and so excited to have you all here today. And thank you for being here. So we're going to kick off today by talking about, we're going to talk about KPIs and employee relations metrics. But KPIs means we're kind of growing, we're improving, we're maturing. And that's because so many of us are already tracking sort of basic employee relations reporting. employee relations metrics. What you're seeing here is from our benchmark study that I mentioned before. And over the years, we have established norms of what traditionally employee relations teams are tracking. And so I wanted to put these up here. You know, people are looking at things by issue type, issues by location, issue disposition, by function. And you can see some of the 7 core types that the majority of our ER colleagues are tracking. So I wanted to start, and we're going to kind of take that a step further and talk about KPIs and how those are different. But I wanted to sort of have you introduce yourselves, tell a little bit about your roles, and maybe a key metric that you have found that has had the most impact in your role that you're in right now or previously. So I'll start it off with Margarita. I'm gonna throw it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Deb. I think, you're going to offer us so much information about key KPIs that everyone should consider, but I want to just quickly take a step back and talk about 2 things that I think matter when you're thinking about establishing KPIs. So the first thing is that I would encourage you all as ER leaders to think about who your stakeholders are as you start to think about what your KPIs should be. So for example, HRBPs are a typical stakeholder in the work that we do, Employment Law Council, and reach out to them as you're thinking through this to get their reactions and make sure that they agree with what it is that you are planning to measure. And they may have some pushback, and you should welcome that, right? The second piece that I would think about is once you establish your KPIs, consider bumping the results against your people insights or your people analytics team, because they tend to have really, really rich data that can further inform whatever it is that you're seeing coming from your KPIs. And that includes your HR compliance team if you have one in-house. So those are 2 things that I would give serious consideration to.
Yeah, I love that. It's about what are you going to give to them? It's about building a conversation. I mean, the reality is all of this data, the best data drives questions, right? It doesn't tell you exactly what is happening. It tells you what you need to be looking at and where you need to be digging in. So really great piece of information. Adam, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, Deb. And thank you for having me on again today. Adam Pennell, Director of our ER function at Honeywell. We have a very large organization, so I lead our COE focused on complex investigations, but additionally we consult and manage a subset of our ER matters that HR business partners are also handling on the ground. This COE has been in place for a little over 2 years, and I would just stress that we have been obsessive about our data and understanding our data. I know we're going to get a little bit into cases per 100 or cases per 1,000. That's really been our focus as of late. But my biggest takeaway, just reflecting over the past 2 years, is really understand your data, because you're never going to understand your problem statements, and you're never going to understand different ways to view it unless you know it. And so my guidance and my recommendation is just to be obsessive about understanding your data and then understanding how to get better. And that's really the first step.
Yeah, that is great advice. And I love that, we have different, your COE, everybody's going to be set up differently in how they look at it, and just finding a place to start, choosing a few, right? A few things to start looking at, and then you can build it on from there. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me as well. I would say, so I lead the employee relations function for Robinhood, and Robinhood was founded in 2013. So that sort of gives you a little bit insight of where we are in our life cycle. The employee relations function, though, is only 4 years old. And so, we've had a lot of learning, a lot of growing, a lot of building over the past 4 years. And similar to Adam, one of the things that we have learned is that we just didn't know our story until we started digging into the data. And so because we were in the build function, We were just trying to get it done. We were trying to, basically influence our culture. We were trying to figure out what direction we wanted to move in. But until we knew what the problems were, we had no idea where we wanted to focus on. And, I'll talk a little bit more about what we learned from the data that we started pulling. But I would say that you honestly don't know what your problems are. I think a lot of what we do has a lot of headline tendency, if you will. So there, some of these cases that you get involved in, and they kind of escalate and get out of control. And so you tend to think that that's where the focus is, but it's not until you pull the data do you really understand what's happening.
It's in the data. I mean, I think for a long time, we felt with our human resources, it was harder to pull data, that every situation is very different. And it is. Every investigation is very different. But the reality is you can pull it. You can start looking at similarities. You can start looking at where things are pulling up, where they're starting, how they're finishing, how we're reacting to them. There's a lot that we can use. Rebecca, how about in your experience with this data?
Yeah, having come from deep dives in talent organizations and really big companies, and then before that, HR business partner, and now, of course, I'm obsessed with helping ER functions step into their own and finally get the attention and love that I know that we deserve. I think a lot about performance and how valuable analyzing performance improvement interventions is from a talent perspective and from a business perspective, business risk. And so knowing that we can highlight issues around performance management to demonstrate the work that we're doing and the value that we're adding, that makes me really excited. And I think about, engagement data and talent data that gets all the attention in companies, and because it's, cool, and we tend to be in the shadows sometimes, and we're solving issues. We want to be more transparent. This is how we do it, all of this data. So it's hard for me to pick my favorite, but I just know that helping our community get better and more savvy at highlighting data will only help us be even stronger and help our organizations thrive.
Yeah. And I think the point that you're making and that Michelle's making, and even Adam talking about sort of the newness of your functions. I mean, Adam, how old is Honeywell? And you've had the COE for 2 years, right?
Correct.
Right. Michelle, your company's new and you've had for 4 years. So we're still in our infancy. And so now organizations have made this investment in putting people in these roles, and they're going to start thinking about, well, what's the return on that investment and how has it made a difference and does it matter? And we do now have the data to start having those conversations about the difference that organizations are making. And as organizations grow, obviously, we can't always grow with them. We have to find ways to build efficiencies. And certainly part of that is becoming more proactive. And you do.
I don't want our audience today, if they're not on this journey yet, using all of this data or even having access to it yet, don't be overwhelmed. Start small. You're going to see some really cool ideas for KPIs today, but don't let it dissuade you from just like starting where you are. It's okay. We all have been there.
One of the things I love about the KPIs, if I look at these core metrics, right? Issue type, what's the issue? You can take that one metric and drive KPIs out of it, right? And you can say in 2025, I'm just gonna, let's clean that up and start looking at that thing. So great point, Rebecca. Don't, start small. That's why I love the ERQ. Like, where are you on your journey? And, when you have a COE, Honeywell's invested in a COE, you can spend more time. I'm sure Adam has people on his team. This is what they do. And we know that's not typical for every organization. And so we're going to learn from those things and then find where we can make small changes and get some great insights. All right, so since we're going there, let's just flip and talk about what a KPI is and why it's different. And, some people say KPI is key performance indicators. You might hear it's key predictive indicators in different ways. We, of course, put a definition up here. It's a measurable value that demonstrates how effectively an individual, team, or organization is achieving specific objectives, right? So how effective is it? We're not just counting. And I know as a leader now and in my role, if my team comes and says, oh, we've had X number of these, my answer is, well, so what? Like, tell me what that means, right? And that's what a KPI does. It really helps you understand the data. So when you think about KPIs for our panel, How do you determine sort of the most relevant KPIs to align with your goals? Like are there some that you're using now, some we may talk about, some we might not, that have been effective? I'd love to hear from any of the panelists on that.
I think, when I think back on the past 2 roles that I've held, they've been with mid-sized tech companies that hired me when they were at a stage of wanting to rethink employee relations, right? And wanting to further examine and build up the function, right? And so when we began building it out and building out the framework, we wanted to start tracking issues, right? What issues like retaliation, policy violations, harassment. We started out at a very, very basic level, time to close investigations. These were issues that really, really mattered to the chief people officer, to our CEO. So it's so critically important to think about who your stakeholders are and what's going to matter as you start to tell your story and help them to understand your value. I don't know about most of you on the call, but in my experience, most people in HR, especially senior leadership in HR, in theory, they understand the value add of ER, but they don't really understand all of the components and all of the moving parts. And so this is an opportunity as you continue to evolve, right? As Deb said, you can start small, but you can evolve over time, and your metrics can become more and more sophisticated depending on where your organization is, how long you've existed, et cetera.
Yeah, and I'll echo that and just add a little bit to it. I mean, when I think about KPIs, and we talked about this a little bit in the last session, there's really a pecking order to them, or a macro and micro, into how I think about it, at least here at Honeywell. My KPIs for the team, the COE, are different from the KPIs to the HR business partners, are different from the KPIs that the CHRO want to see. So KPIs really are around your strategic efforts and your strategic thinking as a leader. And in this, just holistically gives you the opportunity to say, as a leader, and to Margarita's point, how can I get my leadership thinking in the same direction in the value that not only my team's going to bring, but how can I get them buying into the story, buying into what we're doing, instead of just the day-to-day that we all get integrated with. And so that day-to-day, it's important for folks on the call that are leading teams. It's easy to get bogged down in our ER is day-to-day. ER is day-to-day issues. And so it allows the leadership team to take a step back and say, how can we have a lens that speaks to our senior leaders? And that's really how I think about KPIs.
And I'd echo, both of what my fellow panelists have shared. We're very similar in the thinking of, when you look at these KPIs, what is the story that, one, it's telling? And I'd say the other thing is, where are you in your organization's life cycle? What are you thinking about at that juncture? So one of the things that we realized is that we weren't thinking about this at all. Really, what we were trying to do is get into that everyday ER space, trying to establish ourselves as a function in the organization and showing our value. That's where we started. But then what we realized is that what we really needed to focus on is, for example, maybe an issue to case, issue to type case types, things like that. Those are the types of things that we really started reporting on quickly. And one of the reasons we started doing what the story was. We weren't sure where were we spending most of our time, where, what are the efforts that we were putting in, what was coming out of, some of those efforts. And I'll share with you, one of the things that we realized was our biggest case type when we started pulling data was actually data loss. So we were actually, we had probably maybe triple the other case types, data loss type cases where people were actually taking things from our organization. And as a result of that, once we realized that that was an issue, we started going to our leadership and saying, we need to invest in our infrastructure. We need to invest in our security engineering team. And we hired probably about 6 or 7 people as a result of pulling that data and realizing what the problem was. So I would say, to both of my fellow panelists' point, you can start small. It could just be like, well, what are the issues that we're actually seeing, depending on the size of your organization. For more established organizations, you may need to go a little bit deeper. But again, for my size, which we only have about 2,700 employees, that's where we started was what's the actual problem that we're trying to solve here?
It's really incredible how quickly you can start seeing trends, no matter your size or how many issues you have, but you have to track them. You have to start looking at them. You have to sort of, looking at them against something to understand them. I loved, Margarita, what you were saying. It's like, what are the challenges? Do we have high turnover? Are we losing people? Is there a lack of trust? Are we not hearing from a certain group? Like, what are we trying to look at, and how can we consider what might tell the story, what data might tell the story? So that's great. Anything else about how you have maybe some barriers you've had with the KPIs? I love, Michelle, your story, because there's a direct relation to business performance there, right? Or risk to the business, huge. Any other stories on that, or how you've looked at things?
I have a quick story around when I was at VMware a few years ago. This was sort of following the lift of COVID, right? Like post-COVID. And we were sharing some KPIs that pointed to a population of individuals that were very junior in a particular line of business that seemed to be failing from a performance perspective, right? Like very high numbers of individuals being placed on PIPs. And what I'm about to say speaks to the value of connecting with your people analytics, assuming your organization has one, with that team, because what we did was we took that data, we shared it with the people analytics team. They bumped it up against their own data. And that's where we realized that these individuals did not have the benefit of an onboarding process that existed pre-COVID, meaning, it was a very robust in-person, et cetera, et cetera. And the results of those in that same age range who succeeded pre-COVID and those who were failing post-COVID was really, really insightful, right, for the entire organization. And just spoke to the chief people officer around how do we strengthen our virtual onboarding programs so that we can, stem this tide of individuals who are basically falling and failing within our own processes and the organization.
Wow. And we know how expensive it is.
Yeah.
When you have turnover, when you have to retrain, and being able to look at, sometimes you don't understand the value of something until you take it away, right? Until that's gone and you see the downward impact for it. It's great. I love that. Anybody else? Adam, you got a doozy like that one?
No doozy that comes to mind, but I think what's important, and I think you touched on a little bit, Deb, and maybe Michelle did it as well. One thing that maybe some folks on the call are thinking about as we talk through this is maybe we don't have the data at our fingertips, and so as important as I stress being obsessive about the data is, there's this slippery slope to we're going to capture everything manually because we want KPIs. And so I think for a lot of for a lot of functions that are maybe newer, it's how do we think about just capturing the data that doesn't take a lot of our time away? And that piece is key because, and I think really these benchmarking studies are very important because then you can influence maybe you don't have the data in your hands, maybe you don't have the data for your company, but you have benchmarking data. So you know the value's there, but you don't have it internally. So if you're thinking about how do I get the data, maybe talk about the data that exists that maybe you don't have the tools internally yet. Again, you don't want to take a lot of your time away from the key initiatives that you have right now, but start to think about priorities and opportunities to capture that data and ways that you can do it that make sense for your company and your function. Obviously, case management systems are a huge win for this, but there's other ways to just start thinking about how to leverage data internally and then really start from the end and work backwards.
Yeah, it's great to build that business case. Excel spreadsheets still work. I mean, they work to a certain extent, but they can start to show the value of what if we could do this. And, they only work to a certain extent, but what data would it give? So you really get that pull from your senior leaders wanting to know what's going on because if they don't have clarity, it could really cause issues down the road. And that's really the goal. And again, I think about our other functional counterparts. Can you imagine, right? Not knowing like the days outstanding on cash or, collections and things like that. Like, sorry, in our finance department, we're not going to do that this year. That would be unacceptable, right? Because it's such an indicator of what's going on in the business. And that's where we want to get. So,
I'm going to chime in, like, in a past life, we've been able to track the performance plans that managers are working through and connect those to employee relations issues so that you're telling the story that it's not coming in a vacuum. There are not just more ER issues in general. There's a path. And if you can demonstrate that this is natural and normal and you're tracking it and you're taking care of it and resolving it, connected to the business because supporting managers through this, it can be really powerful to show that you're not just putting out fires that are randomly cropping up, right? There's some intentionality to it. So even something as simple as that could be helpful.
And I always remind people to also look about the data that's not there, where there aren't issues, right? The zeros, that also tells you what's going on in that organization or that part of the organization that could be problematic down the road because you don't have these things cropping up. And is it because there's a leader that's maybe not allowing that, or it's just not a culture where people feel comfortable coming forward, which of course can lead to a lot of things. So many different ways you can look at it and ways you can start. You don't have to just jump in and be sort of analyzing all of this and having all these KPIs, which is sort of a good time to share. Maybe we go to the next slide. So what we've been doing at HR Acuity is really thinking about, what are some of the KPIs that you should be tracking? Now, to Adam's point and Margarita, Michelle's point, Rebecca's point, there may be ones that are specific for your organization that are not on this list. There may be some here that aren't prioritized or not the great starting point, but just to get you thinking about how you can use data and look at it in a pretty easy way from having the raw data that can start to tell stories. So I'm going to quickly go through these and sort of share with you what they mean. And then we have a couple examples to go through, and I want to sort of get the reaction from the group on these. I shared these with them last week. And I know some of them, there's some questions about some are doing other things. So again, case volume per 1,000 employees by category. And I actually will caveat on that, depending on your organization, per 100 might work fine. We use 1,000 in the HR Acuity benchmarking. So that's what we use because all of our companies taking it have at least 1,000 employees, but you can make these your own. So case volume per 1,000 employees, it really normalizes the data across your organization. So you can cut it in different ways. I'm going to show you an example, but really help you identify trends or spikes on a specific issue category, or compare performance or issue cases across teams or locations can be very powerful and a really great place to start. Is that one. Very similar is the EEOC cases per 1,000 or per 100, a benchmark we have. You'll also notice here, anything that has a star means that there actually is a benchmark already in the HR Acuity benchmark study. Excited to say that if it has a plus sign, it means that as of 2025, we're actually going to be having a new benchmark because we're getting some more data in this year's study. So we're excited about that. So EEOC cases per 1,000 employees. Again, if you're a small organization, you might be able to, you probably could tell me right now how many EEOC cases you have. If you're a much larger organization, you might want to see, how are we, do we have, we have EEOC cases, like it's going to happen, people, if you have a large organization. But how does that compare? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it increasing over time? If you have a very large organization, maybe, and again, this is a US metric only, but there might be similar metrics that you can use in other regions. Issue to case ratio is one of the ones that I think is really fascinating. This came up at a couple benchmarks, a couple roundtables ago, but really helps you measure the relationship between the number of issues raised and formal cases open. So, it can help you understand complexity. People raise cases with, my FMLA has been violated, I've been retaliated against, my ADA has been violated. I'm sort of throwing out a lot of different acronyms, but it's never so clear. And so that leads to greater complexity, more time that you're going to have to spend really thinking about all the different issues that have been raised in one case. It can indicate issues with investigator workloads, emerging trends, and employee concerns. So a lot of things can be gleaned from issue to case ratio. Again, looking at it in a vacuum, you'll look at a number and say, I don't know, is this good or bad? Looking at it against the benchmarks that we're going to be providing externally, so similar companies, or within your organization or over time, how that's changed. If you have a team of 10 on your employee relations team and the issue to case ratio keeps increasing, that means things are getting more complex. So again, why are they getting more complex? How is that changing the workload of our team? So it can be really interesting to look at. Case disposition, that's one of the ones that we're going to explore a little bit further today, but it tracks the percentage of issues that are found to have merit or substantiated compared to those that you might deem unsubstantiated or inconclusive or substantiated without another reason. It helps you identify sort of the quality of reporting. It can look at your investigation processes and really help you identify areas of improvement. Or maybe there's areas that you're treating people differently. You're substantiating at different rates in different regions or different locations. Your investigators are looking at things differently. There could identify some bias in your organization as well. So a great KPI to look at. Employee relations staffing ratio. All of you that think you don't have enough people, this is a good one. We have the benchmark. It's actually a norm now because it's stabilized so much over, I think, the 7 years that we've done it. We identified it as a norm. So when you need help in your organization, it's great to say, look, we have X number per 1,000 employees of ER professionals. And for an organization our size, we're really low. We're really low. We need more. So it's great to start looking at that. How is your population or your group changing based upon the size of your organization? How do you ensure you have adequate resourcing to support the case management that's coming in? Hotline issues per 1,000 employees. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but again, over time, are employees building trust? We did a webinar with Chris Gagnon from Curaleaf, and he talked about how their hotline issues per 1,000 employees went down tremendously over, I think it was like a 3-year time period, and it really showed that they were building trust in the organization. Or maybe it's, going down more than others, or you have less calls in certain regions. So it can really be very, very helpful. Similar to the name versus anonymous reports. So this is for your hotline. Are people feeling comfortable, or are they more likely to be anonymous when they report something? Again, do we have more insight on employee trust and psychological safety within the workplace?
I love that one because it speaks to culture and what kind of a culture are your employees experiencing? So I love that one.
Absolutely. And those two will also have in the based upon the benchmark this year. ENPS, which is we call it the ENPS, but it's, are we asking people how we're doing? And so, ENPS, at least in HR Acuity, we ask sort of the classic, how likely are you to recommend your employer, a fellow colleague come forward to HR with something similar, an issue similar, how'd you do? that's really the best. That's how we're going to get people to come to HR. Was it trusting? Was the process okay? We ask other questions like, were you treated with dignity and respect? Was your issue handled in a timely manner? Right? We're not asking, did you like the outcome? But how are you treated when things go wrong? And so hold yourself accountable to a number. It's never going to be 100. Everybody's not going to be satisfied. It might not be high, but what is the benchmark? And what are we trying to achieve? Can we move it a little bit further? Just like we do with all other survey types that we do with our customers and our employees. So it can be really powerful. And the last two are really related to dollars. And we hear this a lot. How do I show the ROI? How do I show the dollar? How do I show the investment? So two here, and we're going to dig into one a little bit, is what we've called performance management impact. And that calculates severance costs related to performance management. And again, it could be other costs. You can decide what's included in those costs. Divided by the total number of employees. And this will really help you assess impact and efficiency of performance management strategies that you're using, if that's something that your group does. We're going to talk about that one later. And legal costs, same concept, but measuring the external legal and settlement costs related to employee issues divided by the number of employees. These came to mind, a metric that we look at HR Acuity is revenue per employee, right? How are we getting more efficient as we grow, as we continue to grow? So there's a revenue. So it's very similar to that. Are we getting efficient? Are we doing things that are impacting the cost and the risk to the organization? So we're going to go into a couple of these just to show you sort of them in action. But I want to pause here to get reaction from the panelists on these, or maybe some that they say, yes, we use this, we don't use it. Here's some of the challenges. They're not all going to be easy to gather right away. And then, just have some conversation about it.
Can kick us off. So just a couple of things to think about when you're looking at these. So I will proudly say that we are HR Acuity customer. And one of the things that we did when we set these up was think about who did we need to report to. So when we became a public company, one of the things that we kind of segmented was, okay, these are the things our board is going to want to know about. These are the things that, the leadership will want to know about. And so interestingly enough, or maybe not so interesting to many of you, we decided to separate our employee relations function versus our investigatory function. And one of the reasons we did that, again, was thinking through some of these KPIs, who was going to need the metrics, who was going to need the data. We felt like it was most beneficial if we segmented those two. So I just wanted to share that with you. And one, again, when you're thinking about case volumes, I mean, for most of us, the highest case volume is probably going to be performance related. And so, again, when you think about that, who wants to know about that? Probably not the board, and so when you separate those, or you think about the setup, it does help when you think about future reporting as well.
I love that. I must think about sort of an extra piece on this. And we have a one-pager on these KPIs, which give an explanation, which we can get out to everybody. But I'm thinking about, we can build on that sort of with the KPI. Why are you doing it? Why are you putting this together? How often are you going to be doing it? So I think those are some great things to think about as you do this. Anyone else?
Yeah, I won't go too much into the cases per 1,000 because I think we're drilling down to that soon, Deb.
We are,
right?
Yeah.
But these are, I will say for Honeywell specifically, these are KPIs that just to be transparent, we're not tracking, probably even half of these at the moment, but there's significant opportunity and significant appetite for us to start tracking these. One of the key initiatives that we're going to have this year is really bridging these KPIs with other HR related KPIs or data points that we don't have access to. And I'm not sure we touched on that initially, but I think that's really important as well, is to understand that these are indicative, or there's correlations between these KPIs and other things that may already being looked at in your organization. So really maturing these KPIs is just that bridge into the value again, into other functions, other stakeholders understanding, okay, there is something here to the ER world, to the ER data. It's not just that day-to-day, those day-to-day items that they understand that we do best. There is something here, and that correlation matters. And again, I think that builds the trust internally with your stakeholders, and that builds that value add as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And bringing in other data, it's not in a vacuum. We should understand our data, but then be willing to go. And I'm sure there's KPIs that have, that we could put together that meld that. And some organizations do that. They put it sort of in a data lake and they start looking at things, and we should be doing that as well. We're getting some great comments here, which I can't look at all of them, but I'm going to look through all of them after. There's some things on time to close and how quickly, a KPI, how quickly you get, you answer someone, or you manage a case. Someone asked about how do you calculate the employee net promoter score. It can be a couple ways. You can use a classic net promoter score, which is on a scale of 100, which might be confusing, but you might just ask some questions, right? If you send a survey out, rate on a scale, Likert scale 1 to 5, how likely are you to recommend someone go to HR? Were you treated with dignity and respect? And then calculate it. And there's your score. So, don't overcomplicate it. Do something that you can do quickly with it, like an average. It just gives you a baseline to go after and say, we were a 3.5, maybe next year we should what can we do? Let's look at the data. Maybe we should talk to people. Maybe we didn't get back to them in time. Maybe they felt, get more data to see how we do it. Someone talks about time to close. I also want to mention, because in this report are these benchmarks. So you can download this. So I think you gave a page number. We give number, it's done annually. You can decide you want to do your quarterly. I think annually internally is too long. We're just not going to do a benchmark more than annually, but certainly quarterly or monthly, whatever cadence works best for your organization. Let me just, and we are going to share the one pager. Let's go to the next slide. Let's dig into them a little bit just to see them in action. And I will preface this by saying this is fake data. It's illustrative data. I don't want to call it fake. It's illustrative data here. We're going to take the first one, case volume per 1,000 employees. So we're looking at it by 1,000. It's looking at those trending and normalizing it, right? If you have, one big division with, a lot of people in it, and then another division with less people, it's hard to tell. That big division is always going to have the most issues. But when you normalize it, maybe there's something spiking in some of the other areas. So the calculation is pretty straightforward. It's the number of cases within whatever time period you're using, divided by the number of employees, divided by 1,000 rather, or 100, whatever you use. So my example is 20,000 employees, 865 cases in the quarter. So the CVE, even giving it a little acronym, is 43.23. So that in and of itself, not very helpful. Doesn't really tell you anything. So when you look at the data, or you trend it over time, that's when we can start to see what this KPI really means. So if we go to the next slide, again, illustrative data here. We're looking at a workplace, maybe looking at the work location. Some people are remotes, a lot are in the warehouse or retail locations. And then we have headquarters. We've normalized that data. There's lots of different people, maybe, in each one. And we looked at the company as a whole, and we can see that, I don't know, I'll let our experts here. What does this data tell you? If this was your data, what would stick out to you?
Well, you're obviously normalizing it, which is good. And what's going to stick out when you report this data is going to be that your retail warehouse employees are running at a higher rate than the total company. And so that's going to be kind of where the initial drill down should happen, or the initial questions are going to come from. My experience in this specific area, we've been really focused around actually being a little bit more even granular at the site level. So we have 400 plus sites here at Honeywell, a lot of different type of workforces, but we do have a lot of manufacturing sites and a lot of sites where that drive a lot of ER issues. And so we've actually been doing it per site, and that has really helped us understand, because at the end of the day, what we've really been after is actionable data. And when it's the 30,000 foot view, it's a directional view, right? tells you where to go, where to have discussions, where to have additional conversations. But this site-specific data is kind of where we've drilled it down into. And then that allows us to see across our business units, and then we can filter it by functions potentially. And then it allows us directionally to go have conversations with our HR business partners who sit on that site to get a little bit more, even if anecdotal, get a little bit more insights. And that really, really tells us the story in terms of insights. And so when we end up reporting out these similar visuals, we often already have those answers of what is driving that spike. So we see we do it per 100 employees. So if we see something running at 10 reports per 100 employee, we'll talk to the HR business partner, and they tell us that there's significant changes in leadership, that there's been policy enforcement, there was a overtime policy change. There's a lot of this noise that happens that drives our ER cases up, and us just directionally knowing when to go ask those questions has been really beneficial.
I love that. And the thing is, like there might be a spike for a reason, right? We do sexual harassment training. There might be a spike. That means people listen to it and it worked. And so you don't have to react every time, but going and looking at that, because it might be indicative of something else happening, and or it could help you predict. So we know when we do this, case volume goes up. We can't help it. We're always going to have to do this, whatever this is. But the next time we do this, we're ready for it. Or we put in more resources or things like that. So yeah, someone asked about the line. So the line representative, we should have put a number. What we're doing is the HR Acuity, the external benchmark, just to show where that is. Again, it may or may not be helpful for your organization, but it gives another sort of, where are other organizations, sort of what's the general norm. So great.
Executives love seeing benchmarks.
Yeah, they do. On the flip side of that, I'd also encourage you to look at the remote employees as well.
Exactly.
I know when you're looking at this, your eyes get drawn to the retail warehouse population, but I would encourage you to actually look at the remote employees as well, because you want to understand what's happening on the flip side. And are there things you can replicate as a result of what's happening in the remote employee population? They're not perfect, but there's something that's working there. And are there things that, culturally you can either try to implement within this retail warehouse population as well, or even if that doesn't work, what's the counter story there that's happening with that remote employee? So I just wanted to point that out as well.
Or do they have too few? Do they not
Right.
know how to share a concern or report something?
Right. Rebecca, I was gonna get right at that, and that's where my eye went, and I would question, what does that mean? Does that mean that they're happy working remotely? Does that mean that they're completely disinterested and not focused? So I would dig into that a little more.
Awesome. All right, we're going to move on. These are all, this is why you guys are so good. Let's go to the next slide. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but this is just, again, looking at the same company, all illustrative, same thing. Here's regionally. And to Adam's point, you can drill down as much as you want to in your organization. Once you have this data, if you have the data, it's easy to do the calculations and do it over time. And you could see, again, US is a little bit ahead, maybe Asia Pacific, again, is it cultural? Do they not have the, but you're normalizing it. So now you're looking at normalized, which is why this is such a valuable metric to be looking at. And again, you could look at it by types of cases. So you could do the same thing by performance cases or by policy violations or data loss cases that you might have. Let's move to the next one. I just want to be in time and I want to get through these. Case disposition. This was the percentage of cases that are substantiated. So we're looking at policy violations, behavioral issues, and retaliation. Again, we can see we've just done a real easy calculation. What percentage of the cases have been substantiated, not substantiated with other findings, which happens a lot. We use that a lot, or unsubstantiated. Again, you might use different merit with merit. Our clients use a whole different things, but really something to compare internally or based upon the issues. Why are retaliation cases substantiated at such a much lower rate than other issues where we know, like if we look at EEOC, retaliation cases are the things that typically get proven or companies get in trouble with more so than the other issues. So I don't know the answer because this is fake data, so we don't have to opine about it. But let's go to the next slide. We took the same thing for policy violations, and again, we cut it by tenure. So looking at specific demographics of our population, any comments on this data or the one before? Rebecca, I know you're dying to say it.
Well, yeah, like what's happening with your new hire population? Is there, like I think you mentioned maybe, is there a onboarding issue? They don't understand the policies. Is there, I don't know, is there unconscious bias happening with people who have been here longer where people are sort of ignoring them? I don't know. Like there are many questions, but it gives you a good starting point.
Because I was thinking about Margarita's story she was telling about they did onboarding differently. They stopped doing the onboarding program. So maybe it wasn't as obvious what was right or wrong, or maybe the policies that we've had for years don't make sense anymore to the new generations that are coming into the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, those first two, I would figure out how to cut them further. What lines of business are they in? Even the ages, generationally, there could be some challenges there. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many ways you can look at this data. Again, you don't want to get into sort of paralysis by continuing to cut things to look for, they say if you keep looking for something, you're going to find something, but decide what's important, what's going on. Maybe there's a lot of turnover amongst your, people that are coming in, you're losing people in the first 2 years. And so that could be an interesting thing to look at. Are we not training them? Do they not understand the policies? Etc. Okay, and
there's just so much. People in the chat have such great ideas.
I know, I can't wait.
So much.
And Lexi, can we make sure that I think we get all those chats, so it's great because we're gonna have.
It's so good.
By the end of the month, I'm gonna have another 20. But there's just, and then you can pick and choose like what's right for your organization. So the last one I really like. I think it's harder to get. We'll go to that. We're gonna show here because you really you need to get data from different resources. You're really gonna have to talk to your legal team and your finance team and think about, do we want to track this? But this one is a performance management indicator. It's like the one with the legal one, but it's really looking at the costs related to performance management. When we're losing people, when we're paying them to leave, when we're doing any other type of activities, again, you decide what goes in that bucket, those costs associated with it. Doesn't just have to be severance, maybe other costs, outplacement, things like that. And divide it by the total number of employees. So you pick a time period. I would say for this, a year is probably the time period you want to pick. Divided by the number of employees, 22,000 employees. We spent about 1.9 million in performance management related spend. So our PMI is $88.29 per employee, regardless of whether or not, we know not all those employees, but we're taking that and we're spreading it out across our population. So again, $88, what does that mean? Let's look at it in the next slide. If we start tracking this year over year, we can tell some compelling stories about, quite frankly, the effectiveness and the impact of what, at least in part, the HR team is doing. And manager training. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's not just HR, but how are we doing? How effective are we getting at managing performance? So as you see here, the spend goes up, the employee count goes up. So someone might say, oh my God, we're spending more year over year in performance management. Well, we are, but the reality is we're becoming more effective because we have more employees. So our PMI is actually less year over year. That's when you can start having some really good conversations when people say, why do we have this ER team? What do we need them for? Well, we need them because there's risk here. It takes away time and it actually costs us money. And again, we sort of created these numbers just to illustrate the point. And I think most of you could see how this would work. So any thoughts on this? It's pretty straightforward. So we have two minutes. I wish we had time for questions. The one thing I want to say is our point here was we wanted to make ER KPIs approachable and actionable. They're not that hard. You have the data. Everybody's starting to track this data, or if you're not, put in a few goals for yourself for 2025. Think about, talk to your stakeholders. I'd love that comment from the panel. And so I'm just going to give 2 minutes left. I'm going to stop talking, 1 minute left. If everybody here can take 20 seconds and just share one, maybe, key to success. Adam, what do you got?
Key to success is take a step back from what you're doing every day. Understand what your stakeholders and senior leaders need and wants. Understand what you want for your function, and start obsessing over the data that you can have.
Yes, obsessing. Michelle.
Plus 1,000% to what Adam just shared. I'd say understand where your leaders want to go. And then when you look at your goals, try to figure out ways to be able to match that to some of the data that you're sharing. You don't want to just share data arbitrarily. You want it to have a focus. You want it to be tied to something. So do your best to be able to figure out how you're going to tie it to what their organizational goals already are, because then you'll make sure you'll have an audience.
I love that. Yeah. Margarita.
Stay close to your stakeholders, partner together, collaborate, and overall have a sense of humor. We're not into brain surgery here.
No, absolutely. Keep it simple. And this is, Rebecca, bring us home.
Yeah, I was going to say, seeing the comments and the ideas flowing in the chat, our community is so wise. And so my advice is, if you are lucky enough to have a people analytics team, which Margarita mentioned a couple of times, take them to lunch, manage that relationship, worm your way in, because they need to give you some love and help you correlate all of these amazing KPIs that you're developing.
I love that. And lean on our community, 6,500, right? And growing employee relations professionals, and empower, ask the questions. What are people seeing? Are they seeing more or less? And I just want to thank everybody. I am so excited to read all the comments. I'm going to start creating documenting more KPIs that you're doing. I'm not creating, you are, so that we can share them with our community.
I'm
so
scared,
great.
Deb. I'm scared. You're going to have so many.
Oh, I love it. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you to our wonderful panel. Please join us for more of our webinars that are coming. Don't miss Lori. And if you're in healthcare, definitely sign up for the ER Sync on that. And everybody, stay calm. And 2025 will be okay.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks all.
Bye, everybody.